Hey, this is Kale the Quick here with episode 15 of Sounding Board here at Easter Egg Productions. This week it's myself, Kale the Quick, and D-Man. How you doing, D-Man?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good. How you doing?
Oh, been better. It's halfway through the year. Got it going over that hump, just kind of trudging through to the end, till a Star Wars movie comes out.
To the bitter end.
Yeah. So, what has been up with you, man? We haven't talked to you in a while.
Oh, well, since last time I was talking with you, or rather commenting on things, I knew a couple details about. Well, just playing games, watching movies.
That's true. It is actually the Wonder Woman came out this weekend, the new movie, which is cool to see. Just everybody's wanted like a female superhero movie for a while, so it's nice to see that one of those came out, and that does kind of mark the beginning of the summer blockbuster action film kind of season.
Oh, it does. It's been one of my favorite superheroes for some time, and I've just been flabbergasted it's taken this long to make a movie.
Yeah, I remember a few years ago they were trying to make a what was it? A TV show for it, and I guess they ended up making the Supergirl show. Someone did. I haven't seen it myself, but yeah, I mean, superheroes are really, really popular, but not a lot of lady ones taking the limelight, it seems.
No, that's pretty true. I mean, that's pretty reflective, reflecting the comics especially. There just hasn't been that many heroines with staying power.
Yeah, so you are a bigger comic book guy than I. So is that really your opinion? Is just that a lot of the female superheroes? Well, really, it seems like any superhero just doesn't have a lot of staying power. There's probably way more than there are that like any random person off the street could name, right?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you want to count them all, sure, there's like an equal amount. But no, when I said staying power, what I really meant was there's certain niches, especially after Marvel built this more universe-like, this connected universe of comic book superheroes. And that was in the comics long before the movies, but Marvel still, once again, the pioneer. You had certain superheroes having to fill certain niches, and you also had other superheroes being propelled to heights you'd never seen before, like the Flash or Cyborg is a more recent example of that. But a lot of the female superheroes over the course of comics have been sort of sidekicks or copies of the male superheroes, and that niche is already filled.
I suppose that's true. It just kind of the nature of how all that writing happened. Because,
well, yeah, I mean,
most American superheroes and comics kind of had their genesis, from what I'm understanding, from like the
comics are mostly
50s,
crap,
right?
Comics are mostly crap, but when they're good, they're great. Which means that the majority of what you get is lazy writing.
And that just doesn't really result in compelling, fleshed-out characters.
No, not usually. Most of the time. Not unless the character has staying power for enough writers to touch it.
Yeah. All right. So you said Wonder Woman was one of your favorite things. So Wonder Woman, so I'm going to pretend to be a stupid layperson here. Like I know more than what I'm about to say, but isn't Wonder Woman just like some lady Superman or something? Blah blah blah.
No, absolutely not. I mean, it's become that way as time has progressed, and certainly New 52 was guilty of that. But Wonder Woman has like a lot of staying power. Her rich history. She was, as you say, pretend stupid. So I guess I'll break it down Barney style. She was much like Superman didn't used to be able to fly in his ancient mythos. As in Wonder Woman, she had her invisible jet, which lasted a lot longer and is probably more famous. Her abilities aren't, although some of them she shares some of them with Superman. Her abilities are more in the same way as Superman, how she uses them, and with Superman, you see it from the perspective of an immigrant trying to survive in the world around him. Wonder Woman, you always saw it from the perspective of a leader with responsibility, trying to make the best decision for all parties involved.
All right. Yeah, that seems a very significant difference. I mean, because there's plenty of just like I'm the strongest kind of person superhero stories, which is fine. I mean, that goes all the way back to like Hercules and some of the first stories. Like I think Gilgamesh probably was even just like, I'm just stronger than everybody kind of story. But
I mean, yeah, they both touch on the responsibility of power, but
Hmm.
they touch on different avenues, like from a different perspective.
That's kind of interesting. So for that, and like, so moving on to kind of the broader spectrum of adaptations, there has been a slew of comic book movies. Obviously, the Marvel Cinematic Universe is almost 10 years old now.
Yes.
It was 9 years ago that the first Iron Man movie came out, which I loved. I saw that right before I deployed to Iraq with my best friend, and we had just the best time. Like, oh my God, this is so cool type of
Yeah,
thing.
me as well, actually. Similar sword.
Yeah, and then the other big kind of comic book movies before that were the Dark Knight series was kind of had happened, or I guess right then it was just the first one, the Batman Begins, Nolan's first Batman film, and then Hellboy, and probably a couple smattering of others that.
300.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that was a graphic novel.
Currently
comic
going
book
The
thing.
Walking Dead.
Right.
And also, Sin City was another really big one.
That's true. That's true. So I guess it's been like there's been a lot more comic book adaptations. Like when you look at it, because like off the top of my head, I wouldn't have remembered those ones, even though I remember when they came out. Now that we're talking about it, like being really into them, like Sin City, just the way that the colors were done and all the cinematography, the fun stuff there. And,
well, the comics aren't exactly what you would call traditional for the basis of all of those. So naturally, the movies, when you see them, you're watching a movie. You don't think this is a comic.
Yeah. And that's probably important when you're doing an adaptation. I mean, if you're watching a movie, you don't want to go, oh, this is a novel. I mean,
yes.
You didn't pay $10 to watch a novel for an hour.
You don't want to fall into Watchmen syndrome. Watchmen syndrome. It's a guilty pleasure of mine, but I understand it's a guilty pleasure. It's very, let's tell the novel. And that's probably the biggest mistake I think you could make with adaptations is one of the biggest examples I could think of, going off the comics a bit, for adaptations, Stephen King's The Shining.
Yeah,
you have his TV miniseries and Stanley Kubrick's film.
Yes, I've heard about those. I've never seen them or read the stories, but I've read analyses of them, so I do understand. So I'm going to summarize that The Shining, that was a horror story or a novel written by Stephen King that was adapted a couple times to the silver screen, or I guess the silver screen once and then the home screen another time.
Two different versions. The Stanley Kubrick version is commonly known, and rightfully so, I would argue, as a horror classic. The TV miniseries, not so much. It's widely panned, and I think, and I kind of agree with it's slow and it's unwatchable.
Yeah, I had seen. I've only ever heard that the miniseries was just bad and awful.
Yes.
Actually, I can't remember. I'm certain there has to be a Stephen King series, like miniseries, that was good that someone liked. But
a lot of people like it.
Was that a miniseries?
That was a miniseries, yes.
Oh wow, I did not know that. But yeah, so.
That was a miniseries. I enjoy the kid parts of it while they're a kid, but I'm getting a bit off topic. What I brought up the Shining series and the movie for was that the movie was very successful and, like I said, widely known as the scariest movie of all time by a lot of people, and I have a hard time arguing that. It's one of those classics that's been parodied so often you would recognize scenes from it without actually seeing it.
Yeah, no, and I do that all the time. Like the biggest one is like the "Here's Johnny" thing and hacking through a door with an axe.
That's from exactly. That's exactly from The Shining.
That's as part of cinema now as like talking about getting on a plane
or strolling up to the two ghost twins.
Yeah,
in the hallway. That's another big one.
Every time. You can't watch anything without seeing a reference to that.
The Shining miniseries, Stephen King was far more involved in. It followed the novel very closely, and that was to its detriment. It was long, it was slow, it didn't have to use, because film is a visual medium, it didn't have to use the same vehicles that you would use in a novel to effectively convey ideas and concepts.
Yeah, it's just a different level. So novels, of course, just being text, like the entire world is built in your head.
Yes.
So and this is one of the reasons I personally love adaptations, is because when you do see a movie, it's not that you're watching, The Shining, for an example. It's you're watching Stanley Kubrick's interpretation of The Shining, and that's cool. Like, if you like Stanley Kubrick thing, that's good. And it's you can imagine it the same way as you would like with Romeo and Juliet, which started as a stage play.
Yes.
But here, 500 years later, there are so many different Romeo and Juliets. It's like, oh, it's this director and this acting troops take on Romeo and Juliet, or it's Romeo and Juliet with zombies and stuff, for Warm Bodies, and all these other things. There's so many different flavors because like time has given us just that smorgasbord of adaptations for it. And
with the older stories,
it's copyright law hinders that terribly with adaptations nowadays.
But I think I like to stick fast to the rule when viewing and thinking about adaptations is, have you transformed it for the medium that you're presenting it in? You can't read the book on stage at a movie theater.
It does feel better.
Yeah, that's just completely. That's a different experience. I mean, it'd be the same thing like for a bigger medium is a radio play. Like that's still mostly just text, but it's presented in a different way because like some people just read really, really fast, so they kind of just skim through a lot. But if you're doing it a radio play, suddenly just like the speed and the pacing and the tone of your voice has such an effect on the story and what is like being conveyed to the listener or reader.
No, absolutely. And that being said, I had to say actually my two favorite adaptations of all time are the ones that stick to the rule of there are no rules. And they're both Disney, as weird as it sounds. And I like their adaptation of Hamlet with Lion King and their adaptation of Hercules altogether.
Hercules, that was good.
I did beat James Woods' Hades.
It's true. Okay, you cannot. He just is Hades from now on. He has retroactively always been Hades.
For sure. Treating Hades as a lawyer was brilliant.
Yeah. So, like for mine, my favorite adaptations. That's a bit tougher. I generally just focus on the one medium and not a lot. Jumps that. I mean, I play video games and I watch movies and shows, and there's usually not a lot of jumping between those. And pretty much any time it's been done, it's been terrible. Like the Assassin's Creed movie that came out last year. That was just.
I did not watch it. I mean, years of video game movies have honed my senses.
Yeah, and like honestly, like off the top of my head, the best one I would say, like from like for the jump to assume that they're vaulting the medium here, is the original, like the first one, just that terrible Super Mario Brothers movie, which was just like not at all like the game. It's just there was a guy named Mario and a guy named Luigi, and like the names lined up, and there were some dinosaurs, and I just remember having the greatest time watching that when I was a kid. And I obviously haven't watched it in a while, but like talk about like breaking all the rules and just changing everything to make an adaptation.
Absolutely. I mean, it's definitely an example of that gone wrong.
Yeah.
And having no respect for the source material. I think Kubrick had a healthy respect for the Shining when he made his film.
But Kubrick was just his own personality. I mean,
for sure. You're not going to stop Kubrick from making Kubrick's movie.
It's like, I deeply respect everything you've done here. I will now disassemble it and reassemble it into something else using all of the constituent parts. Then from certain angles, it will appear as if it was the original thing.
Well, yeah, he was a filmmaker. He wouldn't presume tell Stephen King how to write a novel.
I don't know, man. I might, just to fuck with him. I mean, if I had a chance and I wanted to leave an impression, I think that would do it.
Because, yeah, I do. I love his written work, but his adaptations, oh boy.
Yeah, he is. It's like he's not a director or something.
No.
Like that.
Although you have to give the nod to films like Stand By Me, Shawshank Redemption, and Green Mile.
Yeah, I've heard great things about those ones.
Those are fantastic. But he does drama well, and Stephen King's drama is underrated.
Yeah, no, like there's a lot, like he's just kind of gotten all over the place. Like he just kind of writes whatever he wants and usually does pretty well, it seems.
Oh yeah.
So I'm trying to think of other like video game to movie like moves.
I do have to, if we're bringing up the adaptations, I do have to bring up my favorite video game to movie one.
Yeah.
Because it ends spectacularly.
Do it.
With Street Fighter the movie.
Oh my God.
Because it ends with a Street Fighter the movie, the game, which is just a whole other level of your mind being unleashed. It's Inception on the highest levels.
You're doing Inception before you were even born. God, that's great. And actually, if I recall, the Mortal Kombat ones were actually pretty great, but that's just because they're like the story lent itself exactly to like a normal martial arts. Like, oh, it's a deadly tournament. I'm like, oh, okay. Cool.
It was an easy choice because it was inspired by martial arts movies.
Yeah. It's just jumping back. It's jumping back over the median.
They even got martial arts stuntmen, mostly part-timers from the area, to do the actual stop motion for their
yeah, totally. Like their
digitized actors.
It was like some weird digital rotoscoping thing, or no, they just digitized pictures of them. They were all low pixels and stuff. That was great.
That was fantastic. Showed a lot of love for the source material, and naturally, yeah, a kung fu movie is going to make sense. I think that's the other thing that's often lost on adaptations. Does it need to be adapted? Does that even make sense?
Well, yeah. So that actually brings me to a point that I would like to make about another adaptation that came out this year, which was still actually film. It was the Ghost in the Shell movie that came out.
Yes.
So the people, like a lot of controversy there, people mad, all kinds of things. But I was really supportive of it. I wanted it to happen. I was like, cool, a live action Ghost in the Shell movie. And everyone's like, no, just watch the anime. But I'm over here, I'm like, so many people are going to miss out on this cool story because they just don't watch anime. And there's no way to get them to watch anime. So I want them to enjoy the story. So we're going to have to make a live action version of it. And personally, I prefer live action over anime. But
I'm with you on that. I was really looking forward to that, the Ghost in the Shell adaptation. I thought obviously it's going to translate well to film.
Yeah,
because
that's not what it started. It did start as a comic, but like when people talk about Ghost in the Shell, they mean the 1995 movie, not the '89 comic usually.
Oh yeah, I mean when most people talk anime, they're not talking about the manga surrounding it.
Yeah.
It is. I was really looking forward to that movie. I thought it would adapt the film well. Like most anime, I would just suggest cutting down on the exposition a little bit.
Yeah,
because it is a medium of show don't tell.
There are a lot of tropes that are alive in anime that don't merge well, to especially like Western media, because obviously we wanted it to be bigger in the West.
Well, yeah, especially with exposition, because we've gotten over that as an audience. We've gotten over the need for you to explain everything. You know,
we'll just nod our heads and go along for the ride. And then when the roller coaster starts going down, we'll just throw our hands in the air and have a great time.
Yeah.
But some adaptations that I would love to see, because again, like just like with the Ghost in the Shell thing, sometimes the stories that are really good are stuck in a medium and they're not shared with anybody. Like I bring up all the time the Knights of the Old Republic game, the Star Wars game from 2003. Great story. It's in a game that is not aging well. I mean, it held up well, but it's starting to show its age.
Oh yes.
No one's going to play it. Like still, an HD remake,
still playable, but only if you played it at the time. Really, yeah.
You're gonna need your nostalgia to get through. But it's so good, and the story is amazing. And I'm like, wow, this is the best Star Wars thing to come out this decade. And they released like what 4 movies last decade for that.
Oh yes, that came around at the same decade as the prequels. So
Yeah, and
And
God,
it's
that
by far the
story-
best adaptation of Star Wars.
Yeah, and it was beautiful. And then the second one came out. That was good. I'm not sure what the story was, but I liked it. I shouldn't play games at 2 a.m. when I'm 15, but I did.
Oh yeah. Well, the story in the second one, it relied on your fan base from the first one because you needed to play the first one to really dig deep into the story of the second one.
Yeah, which is good. That's a thing that can be a problem, I guess, when you would move a story from one game to the other. Is that a lot of games they'd use the interaction to teach a story. Like they use either the game mechanics or you have to actually go searching for the things, and that is a far different experience than sitting there and having it fed to you.
There is a video game, speaking of those adaptations, that I think, and I'm certainly not in a minority saying this, almost demands a film adaptation. Would be anything Zelda.
Possibly. So I know Surrealism, who isn't here this evening, he because we've talked about this before. Of course, it's Zelda, and we love the franchise. But for making a adaptation, so much of that game is just like it's silent time, of just exploring.
Silent time, exploring, and
and like it would be like, so I'm going to say that I would love to see that adaptation, but with the huge caveat of I would love to see somebody do it right and make it good. I don't know how they would.
I think the best way to start would be an original story. Don't try to recreate one of the games.
True. Which they kind of set themselves up for that with the games. They could easily do that.
Yeah, exactly. With the games, that's one of their strengths, is the ability to just sort of look at the other story and be like, that's cute, but now we have this game, because they're designed around being a game. And if you can design it around being a film more than an adaptation of a game, I think, like I said before, break all the rules, you should succeed.
True. I mean, making a good adaptation is about finding what was good and important about the original one.
Mm-hmm.
Like if someone were to make an adaptation of
and I think to really have the three key characters in the Triforce involved, everything after that is up to the film.
Yeah. No, I would say that I agree. I mean, there are obviously a few other like connecting themes in there, and you can get and like recurring other types of character tropes, but that's kind of the same with any media. And like the only thing that I think you couldn't do is like tell the story of the Triforce characters just like in a cyberpunk setting. Like that sounds kind of cool now that I'm trying to imagine it really hard, but I like that doesn't scream Zelda to me.
You have to stick to the sort of flavor, the theme of the games. They've never broken from their own. So
like, because again, it's visual. Again, is like the medievalish fantasy area type thing.
But Link has been a member of several different tribes, races throughout the several Zelda games that you can really go into his background for a good portion of there and make your own unique character. That's, he has the sort of foolhardiness of Link, but after that character trait, you're free to explore.
True. And I know to take a quick tangent from adaptations here, I haven't played the latest Zelda game, the Breath of the Wild.
I have not either.
But I've heard, and these might be minor spoilers for anybody here, nothing big, but I've heard that it would be better if Link actually died and then Zelda had to do the things, because I can't remember where I heard about it. I believe it was some YouTuber, and if I can remember who it is, I'll link it down later if you're listening to this in the future. But just like you have these three characters, and every single time in every single one of the games, it's that courage has been fighting power with wisdom. But you have a whole triangle there. There's a bunch of other ways that could go. Like maybe power had to overthrow wisdom with courage, and like.
But that could be a great swerve that you're building up throughout the entire movie. You're building up the hero to embrace his courage and go about, and really, that was all about the learned experience that Zelda gained through that. Yeah,
and there's a bunch of different kind of ways you could do that, and I think that'd be interesting to see, especially with some of the stuff we make later with Easter Egg Productions or just anybody else to do is to kind of have some kind of setup normal, like this is the way the normal story works, but then just kind of shift the chirality of it, shift which way the whole thing's spinning in a way, which would be good. Because I do like good twists, assuming they're done correctly. Look at you, Shyamalan.
Yeah, speaking of bad adaptations and his name comes up.
Yeah. Oh God, why?
One of the greatest cartoons I've ever seen.
Hold on, I need to just kill myself really quick.
I put that cartoon up at Tom and Jerry levels of perfection.
Yep. The cartoon is, I put it next to Star Wars. It's on the same shelf.
Yeah.
It's right there.
It's great. Fun characters.
God.
Did you hear that, Shyamalan? Fun characters.
Oh my God. I'm just gonna.
I don't know what he was adapting because none of them were there.
No, I don't know. It was like so. One good thing about that, like the one correct thing, Princess Yue looked like Princess Yue. Like if there was a living human Princess Yue, that was there.
Yeah, but considering that everyone else from the Fire Nation all of a sudden
was Indian.
Yeah, we're Indian.
They're clearly Japanese.
That comes off as weird.
We're so Japanese in the show. They were from the Volcanic Atoll or Archipelago, whatever it's
called.
They
were Japanese, quite clearly. The Water Tribe was Inuit.
Yeah, and you could of course forgive a lot because especially once you switch to living human beings, you need to find somebody who's capable. I would much rather see someone who is good at kung fu, good at wuxia or whatever fighting style Aang needs to do. Who would be if he was 6 feet tall and lanky. I don't care. The important part of the story is that he is youthful and naive, not that he is shorter than everybody. Yeah, does great kung fu, or martial arts or whatever.
I love how in that adaptation the Earthbender's great defeat is a prison of we're just gonna have some guys standing around you while you're sitting literally on a mountain.
Exactly. That was so bad. Guys, you're surrounded by murder rocks. Why don't you just murder everybody? I don't want to.
That was the best part, was that they were right next to the cliff. You could see that's even worse.
Yeah, God, so bad that we could rip on that movie for a long time. So let's get into it. So I was in the military at the time, and when I was in the military, I would go see every single new movie that came out. Great time.
Oh yeah.
And so I drug a friend to it because I didn't have a car, so I made someone drive me to it, and I watched it, and he just did not understand why I was so excited and then so disappointed. So I had to find I found the original series and we marathoned the entire thing in a weekend. And he was into martial arts, he was a martial artist himself, and so once he saw the movie, he was like, "This is terrible. This is terrible. This is terrible." And then he watched the show and he's like, "Oh, that's so cool." And then the Earthbenders, they have fighting styles that usually result in this type of thing, that type of thing. I'm like, yes, it's good.
Because it's a show that cared about its source material.
Yeah, and grew that show premiered when I was 14, and it was had a little kid in it who was writing on penguins, which that sounds amazing to my 14-year-old self. And by the time it finished, I had come back from war. I had married someone. I had grown up, and the show had grown up with me too, and that's the coolest thing.
Yeah, see, I didn't. That show came out when I was a bit older and ignored it. But I was happy I went back and watched it probably about 7 years ago.
Yeah, it's.
I heard there's a Legend of Korra, I believe it's called, something like that, but I'm really not interested. I got what I needed out of that cartoon.
Yeah.
It was wrapped up nice and neatly.
I feel you. I would recommend, especially if you ever want to get into any sort of content creation, story writing, that type of thing, to watch Korra. It's decently entertaining. In the fact that procedural cop dramas are entertaining, you'll get some stuff out of it, but it's not going to be at the level of the original one. And thinking about why the difference is there is, I think, useful to trying to figure out how to make something that's really good.
Oh, absolutely. And just examining as many different forms.
Yeah.
Of something you like as you can.
I mean, my favorite thing, and I'll give them huge props for this, but in The Legend of Korra, the tech level of the world had increased, which I think was was great because they had more of a 1920s-esque kind of steampunk-ish feel. With just and one of my friends was like really mad that like, oh, why did it change? And then I pointed out that in the original show they also had technology progression. Like in the beginning, the Fire Nation had this, and then the Fire Nation found a balloon, and then later the Fire Nation just had a giant armada of zeppelins, and like you could see the technology like as itself, like if it was a character, was also growing and progressing. Like the Fire Nation got more tanks and got more like fancier boats as time went on, and everything had to grow. It was great, and seeing that continue to the point where like now people have cars and stuff was interesting, and they worked that a little bit into the story of the show. But again, Avatar: Last Airbender was just like a complete thing, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Entertaining in like every possible angle.
Well, that's what I'm big on with a lot of the stories that I watch. It's you don't always need to be left open for a sequel. I think if that Zelda adaptation were to be made, like leaving it open for a sequel would be the worst nightmare you could embark on.
That's a big problem in the industry these days. Is they all want the sequel. They all want the big franchise.
Well, they want the franchise. Yeah, they want the franchisable IP, and something like Zelda is not really. You can't franchise it. It just wouldn't work.
Yeah, you'd have to do individual stories, individual things.
Yeah.
But oh man. Yeah, so when I initially got together with my friends and made Easter Egg Productions, like one of our rules is that if we start something, it has to, its death needs to be planned already. Like it needs to have an end, because we were just so tired of like TV shows, American TV shows, going on forever and ever and ever, and then they're like 10 seasons in, and they've been like bad for 6, you know. Because like they came out, they had a few good story arcs, and then the executives were like, "Well, that's good. I would like to buy more." Yeah, Dexter
shows like that. Yeah,
yeah, and like Law and Order, I think is the only one that kind of has somehow managed to transcend that. Like,
because it has a simple format that allows for a large breadth of storytelling.
Yeah,
it has the kind of staying power that wrestling has for the same reasons.
Yeah, it's simple, and like people don't usually come there for like some crazy deep, you know, experience. You know, it's not like they're watching it for the same reason they'd watch an Artur film or go to like a film festival or something.
Yeah, it does. It doesn't need you to care about its characters or its. The setting is everything.
Yeah, it's just they've fixed the tropes, and like well that's good. You can make some good stuff with that. Just if we ever make anything, if we manage to make a show, I don't want to do that. I want to have like nice stories that begin, have the arc, and then die gracefully.
Oh yeah, the current adaptation I'm working on right now has very specific season length, how many seasons, and what the end is planned out.
Nice. And which one's that?
I'm working on something called Dragon Ball Cosmos right now.
Oh, okay. And that's just a show over on your channel or something?
Not yet. I don't want to release until we have quite a few episodes.
Yeah, no, that's...
And I still need a few voice actors. But it is, yeah, it's a Dragon Ball universe that takes place a couple thousand years after the events you see in the show and read about in the manga and such.
All right.
We don't really make mention as to which one of which is canon, because it won't matter to the story. This could reasonably follow both of them.
Yeah, no, canon is a dubious thing. Like, so you and I, obviously huge Star Wars fans, but like they got rid of the extended universe, and
I can still read the books though.
Yeah, the way I cope with that is like, well, they're all everything. It's all just text. Like they're all fake stories. I get to choose which ones I enjoy, and the fact that more came out that don't take that into account doesn't change my enjoyment of anything.
I subscribe to the Zelda theory of canon. They're all great stories. Doesn't matter that much.
Yeah, which is just a different way of thinking about it. It took me,
and that's why we're making the adaptation, because we have a good story to tell, and we think it'll be an interesting view for anybody who's a fan of Dragon Ball or not. Actually, I think fans of Dragon Ball would like the way and the directions we go. It's a very scaled back version.
That's cool.
with a lot of the original series' heart in it. I hope.
Well, it's always good. I mean, that's why people liked it. You'd think.
I love the original Dragon Ball.
I've never seen it actually. I remember seeing Dragon Ball Z like when it was being aired on TV.
Yeah.
In the 90s, but I never knew what was going on because they would never just air the entire thing. They would just air a couple of things that they translated already.
Yeah.
And then a while ago, I found the Dragon Ball Z abridged people, and then I was like, "Oh my god, there's an actual story here that like goes through," and they don't just stand there staring at each other.
They've stuck pretty close to it.
Yeah.
They haven't deviated really from the story, but they've definitely made a lot of remarks on that show that if you've watched Dragon Ball Z, like, these are questions you've thought, yeah. Why didn't you do this?
Yeah, and that's good. That probably plays into something with what we mentioned in the beginning of like, you know, I like seeing this person, like this director. I want to see Quentin Tarantino's Star Wars because that would be ridiculous.
That would be so over the top. It would be amazing.
Exactly. Right. Like, let's see that. Oh, let's just take every big name director, give them a Star Wars license, and see what happens. Like, I don't even care. Like,
you know, like at a certain point, a franchise loses what makes it fresh.
I mean, does it? Because
It
it doesn't need to be fresh. Because I would give anything for LucasArts to be back and just churning out Star Wars games.
Well, for sure. And I think it's a little bit different with film and video game.
I suppose that's true, especially with big released films where you know, they got a big budget and they like, because I know that they.
But with a film, you do kind of want to be kept a little fresh.
Yeah, because there's.
I mean, think about the excitement watching The Matrix for the first time versus watching its sequels for the first time. It's a different experience.
True, very true. All right, so to wrap up here, just talking about adaptations, that type of thing, I guess. A lot of good, a lot of bad, very easy to fuck up. That's probably the biggest thing that we're agreeing on here.
It is. It's very easy to mess up because you have to take chances with them.
Yeah, especially if you're a huge fan of the original, because people that are very devout fans very, very much hate deviation, and it seems that like the deviation can really be what makes an adaptation good in itself. Because an adaptation has to be something different. I mean, by its nature, it's not the same thing.
That's very true. I mean,
yeah. Here's me.
What the term means.
Collecting my philosophy degree. Yeah. All right. So, do you have anything else you'd like to say before we wrap up?
No, I think we covered it.
All right. Well, I guess I'm Kale the Quick. This is D-Man, and I guess we're no longer sounding bored. Catch us in 2 weeks on the on Saturday. My calendar's broken here. I believe it's like the 17th or something for Sounding Board episode 16, where we'll be talking about whatever the hell we fucking feel like. Have a good evening.
Good night.